Welcome to the third session of the Simple course. Today we will start reviewing the DBT Skills Training Workbook, which presents the dialectical behavioral therapy skills. We'll introduce you to the first of four modules, distress tolerance. Following that, we will discuss the four simple strategies and techniques. We'll end the session by presenting the first simple tool, crisis plans. At this point, you may want to pause this video and go to the Simple website, it's simple2021.com, and open session 3 of the course. There, you will find the link to our introductory video, which you can view. It's entitled Pills or Therapy. We'll start each session with a couple of quick reminders. These are primarily for people who are watching this YouTube presentation and also doing the course with a group. This week, I will read the slides. In future sessions, I will post the slides and give you a few moments to read them on your own. This is meant for people doing the live course virtually. Please remember to mute your microphone when you're not using it. Keep your camera on. Raise your virtual hand if you have questions or comments. We'll take note and come back to you at an appropriate time. Keep comments, questions, and feedback relatively brief so that everyone has a chance to participate. Please no side conversations. Keep your use of the chat function to a minimum, especially when we're presenting course material. Make sure no one can overhear what is being said. Concerning the open discussion periods, this is meant for anyone participating in a live group. Each week, we set aside up to a total of 45 minutes scheduled at the beginning, middle, and end of the sessions for questions, comments, and feedback. If at all possible, save your questions, comments, and feedback for these designated times. If you'd like to say something, please raise your hand in the room or virtually. One of the co-leaders will note this and we will get to you at an appropriate time. To ensure everyone gets a turn, and we still have time to cover the course material, there will be a moderator for the discussion part of the session. Please try to keep your questions, comments, and feedback brief and on point. Let's now look at what the homework was for the past week. We asked you to read pages 1 to 13 of the Skills Training Workbook. We also asked you to read Simple Manual Session 3. We suggested you try to make your own sensory kit. And for help doing this, you could view the YouTube video entitled Trauma Coping Toolkit, Soothe Intense Emotions with the 5 Senses. We asked you to submit any questions, comments, or feedback to our email at itssimple2023@gmail.com. Now we'll move to our weekly mindfulness practice. If you are doing the course on YouTube, you can pause this video now and go to itssimple2021.com website, session 3, to view the mindfulness exercise, which is entitled Breathing for Relaxation. If you've done a meditation practice before and became dysregulated, you may choose to sit this out. For those who are doing Simple as part of a group, let's pause now to address any emailed or newly arising questions, comments, or feedback. Today's session is divided into 3 parts. In part 1, we'll review the Skills Training Workbook, pages 1 to 13. This covers 5 topics. 1, who is the DBT Skills Training Workbook for? 2, basic distress tolerance skills. What are they? 3, about this chapter. 4, how to use this chapter. And 5, take a rest. In part 2 of the session, we will introduce the simple strategies. These are covered in the Simple manual. Finally, in part 3, we will introduce crisis plans, which are also covered in the Simple manual. In the live course, there will also be time for questions, comments, feedback, and discussion. We'll also take a break midway through the session. Please take a few moments now to rate how satisfied you are with the effort you put into the homework for the past week. Give yourself a score from 0 to 10, from very unsatisfied to very satisfied. Write the number down on the last page of your notebook next to today's date. This is for your eyes only. It is meant to help you connect doing your homework with the benefits you will be getting from the course. Let's take the plunge and dive into the DBT skills training workbook. Hopefully, you are not hearing about these skills for the first time because you've done your homework and have read the sections in the workbook that explain these skills. In this video, we are not going to lay out skills in great detail. We'll just briefly review them. We will also not repeat the examples, logs, or exercises contained in the workbook. To get most out of the course, please do these yourself. When we're done this section in the live course, we will pause for discussion, questions, or comments about the skills. Because the skills training workbook presents so many different skills, it's important that you keep a list of the ones we are discussing and occasionally review this list. These skills are meant to be put together with the tools and applied in your day-to-day life, so keep them handy. A good way of tracking all the DBT skills is to keep a list of them. There is such a list provided for you on pages 262 to 265 of the second edition of the Skills Training Workbook. You may want to photocopy that list and put it in your binder. Check the skills that you have learned. Quiz yourself to see if you know what these skills are. Use them with your tools, starting with the crisis plan. Warning about acronyms. Dialectical behavioral therapy uses a lot of them. These can be very helpful, but can also be confusing. An acronym is a memory aid in which the first letters of a word or sentence are used to help you remember something else. Today, we consider the acronym REST. REST is an acronym for the first set of distress tolerance skills. REST stands for relax, evaluate, set an intention, and take action. Different acronyms are used in different DBT manuals. This is where it can get confusing. For example, REST is presented in other manuals as STOP, which stands for take a step back, observe, and proceed mindfully. I call STOP and REST just don't do it, the anti-Nike logo. You may still have feelings and thoughts urging you to do something, but you don't. There are acronyms for all the 4 DBT modules. Don't worry too much about keeping all of these straight. We will cover them in the coming weeks. The next 2 slides, which list acronyms commonly used in DBT, might help. Take a few moments to look at them. You can also view them in the Simple website. The acronyms on this slide are for the distress tolerance module. The acronyms on this slide are for all 4 modules of DBT skills training. On the weeks that we summarize the skills, we will also provide links to videos describing them. There are many such videos on YouTube. The ones we posted are just a sample. If you'd like, pause this YouTube video now and go to the website to view a video about distress tolerance skills. It provides a good overview of these skills. As part of the homework for the last week, we asked you to read pages 1 to 13 of the second edition of the Dialectical Behavioral Therapy Skills Workbook. In what follows, we will cover the key points from those pages on the workbook. Remember, this summary is not meant to replace you having read the workbook and tried the exercises. What is DBT? We have already covered much of this material in session 2, in which we introduced the course material. DBT was developed by Marsha Linehan. One of its goals is to help people manage overwhelming and dysregulated emotions. The workbook is divided into the traditional 4 modules of DBT: the stress tolerance, mindfulness, emotional regulation, and interpersonal effectiveness. If you are repeatedly falling into the same holes, you may be at times or frequently hopeless. Like Sisyphus, you may feel that every day is a struggle and that there seems to be no end to your suffering. The workbook reminds us that you can learn ways to improve your life. What changing your life requires from you is commitment to learn how to do this. Many people who have done DBT or the simple course have remarked on how their lives has improved as a result. There is hope. The workbook's first chapter is entitled Basic Distress Tolerance Skills. The first noble truth of Buddhism is dukkha. It means that life is suffering. Although suffering is universal, some people suffer more than others. Suffering is distressing, and one thing that can lessen our suffering and distress is learning to cope. Quoting from the workbook, the stress tolerance skills help you cope better with painful events by building up your resilience and giving you new ways to soften the effects of upsetting circumstances. The stress can be physical, emotional, or both. The stress is often unpredictable and unavoidable. For some people, the stress feels overwhelming, often because they believe they, one, can't bear it, and two, that it'll last forever. The stress demands that we do something. What we do when we're under stress can make a huge difference in our life. In face of the stress, we can cope in healthy or unhealthy ways. Anyone tends to use the same coping strategies over and over again. That's part of our personality. What we can learn to do is use better coping strategies. We each use coping strategies ranging on a spectrum from healthy to unhealthy. Healthy ones lead to better long-term life outcomes. Unhealthy coping strategies tend to put us deeper into holes. The first group of the stress tolerance skills that we will learn are the distraction skills. Distraction skills are meant to temporarily distract you from your pain and distress and to help you get back to a calmer or better regulated state. They give you space to calm down and return to the window of tolerance. This pause can help you to then choose healthier coping responses. It's important to note that distraction is not avoidance. The difference is that you are not avoiding, just postponing dealing with the situation until a time at which you can do it from rational or wise mind. Examples of distraction include doing puzzles, reading a book, doing artwork, crafts, knitting, crossword puzzles, surfing the web, listening to music, watching movies, etc. There are other examples of distraction skills in the workbook. How do you use the DBT skills training workbook? To get the most out of the workbook, keep a list of all the skills you are learning. As I mentioned, the DBT diary card on pages 262 to 265 of the workbook is such a list. Review this list at least once a week and quiz yourself to see if you can describe each of the skills on the list. If you can't, go back and review them. You will need these healthy coping skills when you are using the simple tools. The DBT skills training workbook also contains worksheets and exercises. We encourage you to do these, but you will find that there is an overlap between them and the simple tools. The point of these worksheets and exercises is to help you use the skills in your day-to-day life. The simple tools are also designed to allow you to use the skills in a methodical fashion in your day-to-day life. The first DBT skills presented in the workbook on page 9 can be remembered with the acronym Take a Rest. REST is an acronym for the first letters of the words relax, evaluate, set an intention, and take action. Remember that these skills, take a rest, are meant to be used when you are highly distressed or in crisis. As I mentioned earlier, take a rest is also known as stop or just don't do it. The theory behind these skills is that feelings, thoughts, and behaviors tend to be synced together and align with each other. Of thoughts, feelings, and behaviors, the easier to change is behavior. Feelings and thoughts tend to continue for a while, but we may be able to learn to stop behavior that accompanies them, and that tends to backfire. Stopping counterproductive behavior is the first step. The next step is to relax and calm yourself somewhat. You can do this by focusing on your breathing, taking a few deep breaths, and giving yourself some time to do all of this. If you have stopped and breathed, you may have avoided acting impulsively. Now you may be in a better position to do something other than what you typically do, something that is more productive. In the course, we will present a number of evaluation tools. Evaluation tools help you look at your thoughts, feelings, and behaviors objectively. Evaluation tools are used by your wise mind, which observes your thoughts, feelings, sensations, and behaviors or behavioral urges. Wise mind can also help you to be curious about the thoughts, feelings, and behaviors or behavioral urges of others. In the simple course, we will return repeatedly to self-evaluation and to wise mind. Setting an intention means moving away from what emotional mind wants to do and checking in with rational and wise mind about what is best to do in the current situation. Setting an intention also means figuring out what you need to do to reduce the intensity of your emotional mind and return to the window of tolerance. Setting an intention involves creating a target goal or plan for what you're going to do, deciding what action to take, asking yourself, what do I need right now? Choosing the coping skill that you have learned that will best support you. Taking action means you follow your plan and act from rational or wise mind, not from emotional mind. The acronym Take a Rest summarizes what we will learn to do over the whole of the simple course. Don't expect to learn to do all these steps today. If you do that, you will feel overwhelmed. A beginner's more realistic version of Take a Rest is just don't do it. Its aim is less ambitious than Take a Rest in that it only asks you that you hit the pause button on what your emotional mind wants to do. Using the tools and skills a few times likely won't help much. You have to use them repeatedly until they become a habit, automatic, or part of your personality. Today, in the second part of the session, we introduce the simple techniques and strategies. Can you tell us the difference between techniques, strategies, skills, and tools? Let's start with some definitions. In the simple course, we will learn skills, tools, techniques, and strategies to work with dysregulated feelings, thoughts, and behaviors. These will help us get out of holes that we may have fallen into. Skills, tools, techniques, and strategies are what help us become proficient at an activity. That activity could be anything from being a carpenter, mechanic, pianist, hockey player, or a person living their daily life and coping with life challenges. Let's start by defining some terms. Skill is the ability to do something well. It's expertise. Most of the skills covered in the symbol course can be found in the DBT skills training workbook. Tool is a device or implement used to carry out a particular function. The 6 tools discussed in the simple course can be found in the simple manual. Technique is a way of carrying out a particular task, a skillful or efficient way of doing or achieving something. And a strategy is a plan of action or policy designed to achieve a major or overall aim. Today, we introduce the 4 techniques and strategies used in Simple. They are 1, using good problem-solving practices, 2, being mindful of your personal dashboard, 3, staying in the window of emotional tolerance, 4, using editing, splicing, and pasting. Simple offers 4 techniques and strategies. To get the most benefit from the tools and skills, it's important that you follow them. Let me start by listing them all and then go over each one. The 4 techniques and strategies are: 1, when using the tools, follow the steps described in the algorithms. Use the templates provided for each tool. This will help you adhere to good problem-solving practices. 2, become more mindful of your internal personal dashboard or instrument panel. The dashboard contains 4 instruments. A, the first is for monitoring your energy balance. B, the second is for being mindful of your crisis risk level. C, the third is for staying in the window of emotional tolerance. D, and the fourth is for being aware of your emotional footprint and that of those around you. That's a second technique or strategy. The third is staying in the window of tolerance by pendulating. And the fourth is using editing, splicing, and pasting of the videos of episodes of dysregulated thoughts, feelings, or behaviors to practice and develop new videos. Let's consider each of these 4 techniques and strategies individually. The first is, when using the tools, follow the steps described in the algorithms and templates. This will help you adhere to good problem-solving practices. This slide shows you the template and the algorithm for the first tool that we will learn, crisis plans. I've shown you this slide to give you an example of the algorithms and templates Simple uses. We will come back to the specific algorithm and template later in the session when we discuss the crisis plans. The second strategy or technique urges you to pay attention to your personal dashboard. The dashboard of a car gives the driver critical information about the state of the vehicle. This is extremely useful in avoiding trouble such as running out of gas. In Simple, we suggest people develop an imaginal dashboard with 4 instruments that can help them to be mindful of their physical and mental states and stay out of trouble by, for example, filling their gas tank before they run out of gas. The 4 gauges of the personal dashboard are: A, an energy balance monitor, B, a crisis risk level monitor, C, a window of emotional tolerance monitor, and D, an emotional footprint monitor. It's important to visualize these 4 gauges. This is an example of what they might look like. Let's briefly describe each gauge or monitor. Let's start with the crisis risk gauge. Provincial and national parks often have signs that depict the likelihood a forest fire will start. You may want to think of the risk you'll go into a crisis in the same way. Sometimes the risk is low, other times it's very high. Being aware of where you are can help you take more or less precautions. The second is the emotional footprint gauge. This is inspired by the concept of ecological footprint. People in Western societies tend to have large ecological footprints, whereas those in developing countries have much smaller ones. Likewise, each person can be thought of as having an emotional footprint. It can be small or large, and positive or negative. This footprint can change with time. Also, you might find someone has a very negative footprint for you, but for somebody else, they might have a positive one. The third gauge is the window of tolerance gauge. This is similar to the oil temperature in the dashboard of your car. Ideally, it's neither too cold nor too hot, but somewhere in the middle. Similarly, the optimal state of activation for people is known as the window of tolerance, in which people are calm or alert. When they are hypoactivated or too cold, they are depressed or dissociated. When they are hyperactivated or too hot, they are in fight or flight. The fourth gauge is the energy reserve gauge. This is like the fuel gauge. It can be full, for example, when you're rested and have lots of energy, or it can be empty when you're tired. The imaginary crisis risk, energy reserve, emotional footprint, and window of tolerance personal dashboard or instrument panel helps you to be mindful of the state of your body and mind, and if you are in a hole or at risk of falling into one. These instruments give you critical information about yourself, just like a car dashboard gives you information about the car. They help you to be mindful, mentalize, or be aware of what is happening with you, your body, and your mind. Much of the time, people are in automatic pilot and unaware of what is happening to their bodies and minds. Being on automatic pilot prevents people from trying to influence or manage what is going on with them. Developing an imaginary personal dashboard is one of Simple's mindfulness or self-awareness strategies. Until you're able to visualize such a dashboard in your mind, it's helpful to craft an actual one for yourself. This might also help other people around you be aware of your state. Keep in mind the purpose of the dashboard. To review, the dashboard includes 4 gauges. 1, the window of tolerance. 2, crisis risk. 3, energy reserves or balance. And 4, the size of your emotional footprint, and if it's positive or negative. The third technique or strategy is learning to stay in the window of emotional tolerance by pendulating. Pendulating, which comes from the word pendulum, means swinging from one thing or place to another. When people have feelings, they also have thoughts and images that accompany those feelings. One way of soothing yourself when you're experiencing tense negative feelings and bringing yourself back to the window of tolerance involves distraction or self-soothing. You learn to identify that you are emotional and learn to have alternative thoughts, alternative soothing inner dialogue, and or calming and soothing images. When you're better regulated, you can then revisit the original thoughts you were having previously. To get good at pendulating, you have to plan and practice it, as we will further discuss when we talk about crisis plans. The fourth and last technique or strategy is editing, splicing, and pasting. In this technique, you use editing, splicing, and pasting of the videos of past experiences of dysregulated thoughts, feelings, or behaviors that you have lived through to practice and develop new, more adaptive responses. Many people are under the misconception that when we learn skills and tools, we should be ready to use them in the next distressing situation that we face. This is very difficult. Fortunately, we have many holes we fell into in the past. We can retrieve those holes from memory and use and edit them so that we then use more adaptive skills and get out of holes faster. We take those memories of situations in which we struggled, splice them at a certain point, and insert a more adaptive way of thinking, feeling, or behaving. We then view this new edited video in our imagination. Next time we face a similar situation, we are more likely to feel, think, or behave in this new edited way. Let me say that in different words. We all have memories or mental videos of times we've been dysregulated or fallen into holes. When we are learning to get out of holes, these videos are invaluable in helping us practice alternative ways of thinking, feeling, and behaving. In simple, we're going to learn to edit these old videos by splicing them and pasting in new, more desirable thoughts, feelings, and behaviors that get us out of our holes. As we visualize these videos, we're likely to get activated, so we will need to know how to soothe ourselves by pendulating, then resuming our work on the videos. Let's end this section on the strategies and techniques by reviewing them. Stay organized and safe by 1, when using the tools, follow the steps recommended in the simple algorithms and templates to ensure good problem solving. 2, monitor your energy levels, crisis risk level, emotional footprint, and whether you're in the window of emotional tolerance. 3, pendulate to stay in the window of emotional tolerance. And 4, to learn new patterns, work with old videos or memories of falling into holes. Edit, splice, and paste them with more adaptive or skillful feelings, thoughts, and behaviors. And finally, practice, practice, practice. In the third part of the session today, we will introduce the first tool, crisis plans. What are crises and why is it helpful to have a plan to deal with them? Many people don't take crisis plans, for example, fire drills or flight safety instructions, seriously. They falsely assume that if an emergency happens, they will calmly figure out what to do. This is a common fallacy. In a real emergency, people's rational brain frequently shuts off, and their emotional brain takes over. In a real emergency, many people panic and are unable to do simple things. Research has clearly shown that it's those people who take crisis plans seriously and practice them repeatedly that do the best in an emergency. What is a crisis? A crisis is a time of intense difficulty, trouble, or danger. A personal crisis is a state of feeling which might be associated with an internal experience of confusion and anxiety to a degree that formerly successful coping mechanisms fail us, and ineffective decisions and behaviors take their place. As a result, the person in crisis may feel confused, vulnerable, anxious, afraid, angry, guilty, hopeless, and helpless. Crisis plans are the first tool introduced in DBT and the Simple course because crises are critical events that absolutely need to be understood and managed before anything else. Crises have the potential to be devastating, but when skillfully managed, they can help us learn to cope better in the future. To develop a crisis plan, you will need the DBT distress tolerance skills. That's why the first simple tool, crisis plans, is introduced at the same time as are the DBT distress tolerance skills, which we will cover over the next few weeks. An event that might precipitate a crisis for one person might not for another. What constitutes a crisis is determined by, among other factors, 1, the nature of the stress the person encounters, 2, the person's coping skills, and 3, the person's resource at that time. If a person didn't learn healthy and has unhealthy coping skills, they may have frequent crises. A good metaphor for how coping skills are learned is offered in Eugen Herrigel's book Zen and the Art of Archery. To learn the craft, the archery student must, when learning, focus on every minute detail of what they are doing. So it is with coping skills, including the distress tolerance skills, that can be very useful in a crisis. Practice them repeatedly using the edit, splice, paste technique until the process has become second nature. For new behaviors and thoughts to become automatic, a habit, or part of our personalities, we must practice them deliberately and repeatedly. Elite soldiers practice ways of thinking, feeling, and behaving under extreme circumstances until these become second nature or automatic. This is what we must do to become masters at dealing with crisis. The better we become at handling difficult situations, the fewer crises we'll experience. This 8-step algorithm guides you through the process of developing your own crisis plan. This is the crisis plan algorithm. 1, you need to understand the concept of holes or a specific crisis for which the crisis plans are going to be used. 2, you need to identify the specific holes that you want to work on in your crisis plan. 3, you need to get to know the triggers, feelings, thoughts, and behaviors that are associated with these holes. 4, when doing a crisis plan, recall in your mind a real crisis from the past in which you fell into the hole you're working on, and use the editing, splicing, and pasting technique along with your skills and tools to imagine a different outcome that incorporates your crisis plan. 5, as you are working on your crisis plan, make sure that you stay as well regulated as possible or in the window of tolerance by pendulating. Do this as you're using the editing, splicing, and pasting technique. 6, repeatedly visualize the new edited, spliced, and pasted version of the situation until you can visualize it easily. 7, when a new crisis occurs, use and repeat these same steps for it. And 8, practice, practice, practice. How do we find the holes that we want to work on in the crisis plans? Holes are any dysregulated, problematic, or repetitive pattern of thoughts, feelings, or behaviors that you want to change. Examples of holes include any kind of substance abuse, any other addiction, such as gambling, any impulsive behavior, engaging in repeating dysfunctional interpersonal interactions, self-blaming in a ruminative way or negative self-talk, being overly critical of others, any dysregulated emotions such as anxiety, anger, or despair, problems with boundaries, not being able to say no when appropriate, being passive, aggressive, or both, any frequently recurring behavior that you later regret, withdrawing or running away, thinking of or actually hurting yourself, suicidal thoughts. It's helpful to consider physical, emotional, thinking, and behavioral holes separately, though they often go together. Use the following slides listing common problematic feelings, thoughts, and behaviors to help you find holes you might want to work on. Common holes are also listed in the crisis plan template. Once you have found one or more holes you want to work on, follow the algorithm and template to prepare one or more crisis plans. Use the feeling wheel to find your emotional holes. To find your emotional holes, using the feeling wheel, start at the center by identifying your primary emotions. Work towards the periphery of the circle to further hone in on your feelings. Use this list of automatic negative thoughts to start thinking about your own negative thoughts. They tend to fall into the categories of the person being incompetent and or imposter, defective and unworthy, shameful and guilty, unsafe and vulnerable, or out of control. Automatic negative thoughts are also referred to as ruminative thoughts. Use this list of thinking errors to begin to consider the thinking errors you might make. Automatic negative thoughts stem from thinking errors. If, metaphorically, automatic negative thoughts are the leaves of a tree, thinking errors are the branches. As you will later see, the trunk and roots are called core beliefs. Use this list of externalizing and internalizing behaviors to find your behavioral holes. Internalizing behaviors are inner directed, while externalizing are directed outwards to others or the environment. To review, this is the crisis plan algorithm. An algorithm lays out the steps to follow to accomplish a goal. What is a template? Is there a template for the crisis plan? A template is a structured form that helps you carry out the steps prescribed in the algorithm. There are many different crisis plan templates. This one is a compilation of some of the best features of other templates. The first page of the crisis template helps you to assess or get to know your crisis whole. The second page helps you to prepare a crisis plan. The time to work on a crisis plan is when you're relatively calm. Once you've identified the hole that you are preparing a crisis plan for, think of a recent instance in which you fell into that hole. Use the edit, splice, paste technique along with the distress tolerance skills to come up with an alternative video. The first page of the crisis plan helps you to figure out what your hole or crisis is like. The second page helps you to plan what you should do if a crisis occurs. The crisis plan template has 7 steps. Step 1 asks you which crisis or hole the plan is for. In other words, what problematic feelings, thoughts, behaviors, or maladaptive coping mechanisms are active when you're in this hole. The checkboxes offer you examples of some of the most common holes. Step 2 asks you to identify what might have been the triggers that got you into that crisis or hole. Once again, some of the most common triggers are offered in the checkboxes. Step 3 asks you to consider, along with the hole you've identified, what other feelings, thoughts, or behaviors are typical or common during those times. If you've identified a behavioral hole, this is likely to be accompanied by certain thoughts and feelings. Identifying these will help you to get to know your hole better. Step 4 asks you to consider what is it that you might be thinking or doing that is making you go deeper into the hole. For instance, if you're depressed, isolating and staying in bed might be a way of digging yourself even deeper into that hole. Step 5 prompts you to ask yourself if you are in a crisis at the present moment. If you are, this is a time to use your crisis plan. Step 6 reminds you to rest, stop, or just don't do it. It's a suggestion that you not dig yourself deeper into the hole. Step 7 has 4 parts and is the crux of the crisis plan. The first part asks you to consider distress tolerance skills, such as distraction, self-soothing, radical acceptance, self-encouraging statements, etc., that you might use on your own to lower your activation. You should give this first part of step 7 a really good try before proceeding to the next parts. Part 2 of step 7 asks you if there are non-mental health professionals, such as friends or family, that might be helpful in helping you with your crisis or distress. If you're going to resort to a friend or family member, it's important that they have a positive emotional footprint for you and that you have discussed ahead of time and they have agreed to be part of your crisis plan. You also have to discuss what might be helpful for them to do with you. This might be something like listening non-judgmentally or helping you to distract yourself by doing an activity with you. Part 3 of step 7 involves resorting to PRN medication. That may be helpful for you. To use this, you have to have a discussion with your physician as you're preparing your crisis plan. Part 4 involves considering professional resources, such as the crisis line, available mental health professionals, or an emergency room that you might resort to if the other previous strategies have not helped you to diminish the intensity of your crisis. It's important to keep a list of these resources, how you can reach them, and when they are available. We will cover assertiveness scripts later in this course. It may be helpful for you to have one if you're requesting help from a professional. It will also be helpful if you have discussed with that professional how they may be part of your crisis plan. Steps 2 and 4 of the crisis plan template calls for people to seek help with their crisis from family or friends and from professionals. Some people might find that challenging. People, be they family, friends, or mental health professionals, who have a negative emotional footprint, have difficulty staying in the window of emotional tolerance, and easily become dysregulated or judgmental rather than understanding, may make a crisis worse rather than better. When including family or friends and mental health professionals in a crisis plan, it's important to prepare ahead so that these are helpful, not negative experiences. Ideally, help from others would be helpful, but this is not always the case. So, when getting help from family and friends, seek help only from those that are likely to be helpful. Consider that many people do not have family or friends that might be of help when they're in crisis. Getting help from professionals can be difficult, especially if you don't know the system or the person that you're dealing with. Get to know the crisis resources that may be available to you. For people who are part of a group, if in the coming weeks you would like to work with us in one of the sessions on developing a crisis plan for yourself, please let us know. The same applies if you want to work with us on any of the other simple tools that we'll introduce in the future. We usually spend 4 to 6 weeks on each new tool. Crisis plans are the tool we spend the most time on. As you learn new tools, don't forget to keep using the old ones. Remember to use strategies we discussed when working with the tools. The following slides, which can be found in the PowerPoint presentation on the website, are meant to help you practice the skills and tools that we are learning. The homework for the coming week is start tracking the skills you're learning using the DBT diary card. Memorize what the acronym REST means. Practice REST when an emotional situation comes up during the week, or practice it in your imagination for a past situation. Do this at least 3 times during the week. Keep track of your practice in your binder. Submit questions or comments to itsimple2023@gmail.com. Read Simple Manual Session 4. Start working on a crisis plan. Craft your own personal dashboard. Thank you for being with me today, and see you next week.